Hi guys, Geoffrey here. In this video, I'm going to show you why and how it's actually 100% possible to save your relationship alone, that it doesn't always take two to tango, and how this happens actually every single day in our Relationships Rebel program. And I'm going to show you the process of how to do this in a very artful and proper way. And be sure to stick around to the very end of this video because these are principles that all my clients now understand. And when all my clients look at all these hundreds of people actually saving their marriage alone, it really proves to them that it really doesn't take two to tango. It just takes a better understanding of the how, of what it takes to get there. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Geoffrey and I help men in long-term relationships or in marriages with the right skills and with the right knowledge to be able to design a thriving relationship for yourself. So if you want more content on this topic, be sure to subscribe to this channel and click the bell button as well to be notified when I post new videos every single week. Now, before I begin this video, I also want to let you know that we still have our free masterclass on the 5 proven steps to rebuilding your relationship from the ground up. So if you want to join that masterclass, be sure to stick around to the very end of this video for the announcement on how you can join that. To set the stage for what we're going to talk about here, we need to first understand the actual problem of why your partner is feeling hopeless, why this relationship can seem a bit one-sided right now where you're the only one trying to save the relationship and your partner has truly given up. So what we need to understand and admit first and foremost is that your partner, if they have given up, they've probably tried for a long time and a lot of times to try to work on things, but has failed many times. And this is especially true when they've tried to work on it many times and you're not even aware of it. You're not even aware of how much effort your partner has put into this. So if you're listening to me say right now that your partner has tried many times and you're kind of scoffing in your own head, that's ironically proving the point that you don't even understand how much your partner has tried to save the relationship. So the issue here is that not only does the problem itself become the problem, but now there's another dimension of problems on top of that where now we have a problem even discussing the problem. And that makes someone feel extremely hopeless really, really fast. And if this keeps going, these multiple dimensions of problems keeps mounting up like this, then you're basically going to have like layers of problems on top of problems. And when it comes to problems layering on top of each other, it's not like a clean stack, but it's more of a complex web of problems that interconnect to each other that makes everything worse. And so I'm sure there's many moments in your life where a certain area of your life has gotten so many problems there that when someone asks you, hey, what's the issue? You just cannot help but sigh because you don't even know what the problem is anymore. It's not just one thing, it's a complex web of many things that's a problem. And so you just say, I don't know where to start. It's almost the same thing here where when your partner feels really hopeless, it's usually not only just because of the lack of safety and trust, but also because of the lack of ability as well in even figuring out and talking about what the problem is. And if you can't talk about what the problem is, you can't even resolve it. And so once we understand this principle, then we can understand the next point, which is what most people do and why what most people do tend to perpetuate this really bad feedback loop, this negative feedback loop. And worst of all, most people don't even know they're perpetuating this really bad feedback loop. The feedback loop usually starts with your beliefs, with your paradigms. And most people here believe that it takes two to tango, that if your partner doesn't want to work on the relationship, it's really hopeless. It's really a lost cause. Because if you really believe that it takes two to tango and your partner doesn't want to tango with you, then the natural interpretation you make, the natural conclusion you make is that, oh, I'm very committed. I want to work on the relationship, but this relationship is breaking down because my partner doesn't want to work on it. She's very non-committal. She gives up easily. Basically, your partner is the wrong one for not even trying. How can you not even try? But if you go back to the previous principle here, and if we understand that the main problem here is really the lack of safety and ability, which it usually is, then you will understand that if you make these wrong interpretations, then you're actually gonna make your partner lose hope even more. Because when you start to blame someone's character, then it's gonna destroy that safety and trust even more, making it even more difficult for your partner to express her thoughts, her true thoughts to you. It shows that you don't even understand or you even fathom the problem to even confront it. And so what you're doing here, you're just adding more and more layers of hopelessness and more reasons for them to feel the lack of safety, the lack of trust, the lack of ability, because you're layering more and more issues on top of the already existing issues. And the worst part here is that because people have the wrong paradigms about relationships, about what's possible or not, and when their partner feels more hopeless and they pull away because you made them pull away, you perpetuate the same conclusions that your partner is non-committal, you start to blame their character again, you start to feel more hopeless again, which makes your partner even feel more hopeless and pull away even more. And while this cycle keeps happening, you keep perpetuating the same negative beliefs. And so this relationship ends and both of you grow further apart. But you will have no idea just how much potential, how much betterment of the relationship can actually happen this whole time. And I find that this is really the massive shame behind a lot of people's journeys, in that they are really sabotaging their relationship, but they don't even know they're sabotaging the relationship often. So the second point I want to make here is really understanding your power in a relationship, just how much power you have to influence the relationship, but also to influence your partner's behavior as well. So first thing we must understand here is that this feedback loop between you and your partner is already existing today, whether you're aware of it or not, and it already exists basically 24/7 in your relationship. So consider this example. Consider that when your partner comes home angry, maybe she's in a pissy mood, bad mood. Well, sometimes her being in a pissy mood and bad mood makes you pissy and be in a bad mood. But then you being pissy and being in a bad mood makes her pissy and be in a bad mood. So here, your response of whether you are responding to her pissiness with your own pissiness will affect her subsequent behavior. But you can also change the cycle to where if she's pissy and you choose to be untethered to that and turn that from negative into positive, then you can also change her feelings as well. So right here should be evidence that what you do really, really matters. It does influence how and what your partner feels and what they do as well. This might sound obvious when I present it this way, but the next question would be like, if it's so obvious, how come everybody doesn't know this? Well, we have to understand here, this example that I gave is just one instance. It's just one instance of a feedback loop. But in our relationship, we literally have millions, tens of millions of moments throughout our relationship of moments like this, of feedback loops where what we do affects what our partner does. And so what happens is that when people are in a position when their partner has really closed off, they're really stonewalling, they've really given up, what happens is that we're often blind to the millions and sometimes even tens of millions of moments in the past, all the little feedbacks of all the little actions, all the little responses that we had to lead to this moment. And so we don't understand the millions of feedback loops that happen that contribute to your partner feeling very hopeless. And so when we're in the point when our partner really has given up, we tend to misattribute our partner's behavior during that time. And we conclude things like, oh, my partner's non-committal, she doesn't want to try in the relationship, she's kind of a bad influence, whatever it is. But what we don't realize here is that the potential of the relationship of your partner was actually there the whole time. That we just slowly destroyed it through the many negative feedback loops that we created because we weren't able to lead that interaction in a proper way and break the negative feedback loops that might happen. So what I want to show you here is that we actually have a lot more power than we think we do. We just need to become aware of the existence of many of these feedback loops and many of these opportunities to break the feedback loops that we have. We need to be able to internally shift and build the right mindset, build the right bulletproof vest, as we say, so that we can shift the negative into positive internally in our own minds, in our own emotions. And once we can do this internally, then we can also do this externally using the frameworks as well. And you'll be very surprised at how much power you actually have in this process because, we enroll, again, 500 to 700 people every single year. And every time we enroll someone, our clients always start off believing, it takes two to tango, and that there's really that when your partner finds things hopeless, has given up, that it's time for you to give up as well, that it becomes hopeless because they really believe in this it takes two to tango myth. But once they learn the right process to actually become untethered, to shift internally, but also to shift externally, then that's when their eyes really get open to a whole new realm of possibility. And what's interesting is that when they start to play out the right processes here, and they start to regain that hope themselves, they're often very surprised at how much their partner's behavior changes as well. And if you don't believe me here, I want you to take a look at all the client stories that we have, the client reviews, the client testimonials that we have, and just watch them describe their situation. And you will see that in all the instances here, they start off believing that it takes two to tango, but once they understand the right processes, that's when they really change their behavior. And once they change their behavior, they're often surprised at how much their partner's behavior changes as well. And so to understand the how can we go about gaining the strength, gaining the mindsets, gaining the right frameworks to be able to lead the saving of a relationship alone, we have to understand something called the internal engine. So if you've been following my videos a while, or if you've been following my masterclass for a bit, you'll know that there's the process here. And the process is really what we call the doing. So the doing is really understanding the right frameworks. So this is about the ability to externally manage conversations, interactions, to turn even stonewalling or really bad moments from negative into a positive. But not only do we have the right frameworks, but we also have the right mindsets behind it as well. And this is the ability to internally shift the negatives into positives. And these two have a very close play to each other in that if you don't have the right internal shifts, there's no way you can play out the right external shifts. You have to be able to have the right mindset to shift things internally from negative to positive first before you can even have a hope of shifting things from negative to positive externally using the frameworks. But then beneath the doing here, there's also the being self, and this is what we call identity shifting. And so the best way to understand this is really to imagine you're standing in front of two smokers who are trying to quit. And so you give one of them a cigarette and one of them says, "Hey man, no thanks, I'm trying to quit." Now you give the same cigarette to the second person and that second person says, "Hey man, no thanks, I'm not a smoker." The difference here is that the first person, yes, he's trying to quit. He's focused on the doing of trying to quit, but he hasn't really shifted his identity to help him quit. While the second person has done that shifting of identity to quit as well. And most likely the second person is going to quit. Now, when you focus on the being and the doing, then you're naturally going to have the having. And the having usually goes in 3 stages for a lot of our clients. The first stage is when you grow your self-esteem. And for us, self-esteem is really 2 parts. The first part of self-esteem is about self-efficacy. And this is about your confidence in your ability to get something done, to accomplish something, to resolve problems and so on. And the second part of self-esteem here is what we call self-worth. This is about your mind's ability to manage your own mindsets, to manage your thoughts so that you can see and grow the sense of your own worth over time. Now, if you notice these 2 definitions, if you master the frameworks and the mindsets that we talked about before, then you will also see here that you naturally will grow your self-esteem as well. So as you grow your frameworks, then you're going to start to have this confidence in your ability to get around difficult situations in your relationship, difficult conversations when your partner is stonewalling, for example, when your partner is giving up on you, when your partner is misunderstanding you and so on. You can understand how to turn that from negative into positive. But also when you grow your mindsets, you naturally understand the skills to grow your self-worth as well. So really, when you master your frameworks and your mindsets, you really start to grow your self-esteem as a whole. And once you grow your self-esteem, we take you to another outcome here, another having, which is when you become untethered from your partner and to the outcome. And so this is the point when you master, you do the process, you play out the frameworks, you play out your mindsets, because that's simply who you are. Because you're confident in your ability to do so, and you're confident in your own worth to actually getting what you want and actually playing out what you want if you play out the right process. So you essentially become more addicted to that process. And when you become untethered and you become more addicted to that process, that is when you also graduate into being able to turn negative into positive. And because you've mastered the frameworks and mindsets here, you should be able to do this not only internally. So even when your partner is giving up or stonewalling you, you can somehow internally turn this, reinterpret this to become less of a negative into more of a positive, not only internally, but once you do it internally, you can do it externally as well using the frameworks. And if you can turn negative into positive, then you have the final having, the final outcome, which is when you become a leader to break the negative feedback loops in your relationship. That is when you start to fight confirmation bias. That is when you can really start to fight the paradox of change that we talked about in 3 videos ago now. And once you have this, usually this is when your partner really starts to come back to you. Now, this is a brief overview of the engine. And this engine is what allows all of my clients basically to stay very motivated, to stay very strong, despite their partner being in a very hopeless state about the relationship. This is what allows people to really break through confirmation bias, really break through the paradox of change over time, and really become the leader to save that relationship by themselves. Without this engine, there will not be that motivation, there will not be that strength to be able to turn the negative into positive and actually break the negative feedback loops that are happening right now. Now, what's also very important though is that we have to make sure that this engine that we have has the right fuel. So what do I mean by that? I want to show you first here how most people really have the wrong fuel for their internal engine, and why a lot of people cannot stay motivated for so long, and when they cannot stay motivated for too long despite challenges, that's the reason why most people really cannot break through their partner's confirmation bias and really break through and shift this negative feedback loop from negative into positive. So most people, when they look at this being, doing, and having, where they really start is with the having part. What they would first think about is what they want to have, which is they want to have the relationship back. They want to get their partner back. They want to change their partner's mind and so on. So once they figure out this having, then they let that having define what they do. So in this case, if your motivation for the doing is to have, most likely you're going to be a hunter. So you're going to be finding the very short-term tactics that you can say, that you can do, that you can think about right now to influence what you have. And so you're not going to be very interested in actually learning the principles, taking the time to actually grow yourself in a proper way, but you're only interested in the tactics because you want the quick tactics to get the quick outcome, the quick having. And only that, when your having defines your doing like this, then whatever you do will always be tethered to whether you can have or not. So if, let's say, you're very hopeful that you can have something, then you're going to be very, very motivated to do something. But once that hope is taken away, then you're going to be feeling very demotivated to do something in return. Now, because of the paradox of change, because of the nature of confirmation bias, the hope is probably going to be taken away from you very, very quickly. Especially when your partner tells you like, there's no hope, there's something you can do to change my mind and so on. Then once that having has been taken away from the picture, then you start to lose a ton of motivation for the doing. And when you lose a ton of motivation for the doing, then that's when you will never master the frameworks or mindsets. You will never shift your identity. You will never grow your self-esteem. And you can never become untethered and addicted to the process. And to make things worse, what people often think about too is that they are hoping that if they do a lot, if they do enough, they do for long enough, then they can eventually be. So the doing eventually leads to the being for most people. But they can never get here again because that motivation never really lasts. And this is why most people can never really break through in their relationship, in careers, in their business, because they're really fueling this from the having, then the having defines the doing defines the being. And if you're fueling your internal engine this way, it's never going to be lasting. It's a really bad way to fuel your internal engine. So what does the right fuel look like? So, when my clients join the program, this is something they learn to do. They learn to shift the way they fuel their internal engine as well. So everything needs to start with who you want to be, defining who you want to be, shifting the identity first. And once you can effortlessly be, you shift your identity very subconsciously here, then effortless being will naturally lead to effortless doing. And when you can effortlessly do, then that naturally leads to effortless having as well. So here, it's not what they want to have that fuels what they do, but it's really who they are or who they want to be that really fuels what they do. And so here, if you fuel your internal engine this way, you're not going to fall for their short-term hunting tactics. You're going to have the patience to actually dig deep into the principles, understand the principles, and use the principles to define what you do and to eventually define what you have as well. And because you're doing because you are, not because you want to have, you're also going to be more steadfast, more consistent, more motivated despite the fluctuations in your outcome over time as well. And because they're able to do, because they're fueling their engine in a different way and they can do despite the outcome, then they are able to master the frameworks and mindsets in a much deeper level. They can shift their identity, they can grow their self-esteem, they can become untethered. And this is why they have the lasting motivation to eventually become the leader, to change their partner's mind over time. And so a lot of you may be hearing this and asking me, for example, okay, Jeff, what is the point again? What is the point of building my engine, my internal engine? What's the point of trying to save my relationship if my partner doesn't even want to try? Why even bother doing this? Well, the ironic thing you have to understand here is that if you even are asking this question, if you have to ask this question, then by definition, you're in trouble. Because by definition, if you have to ask this question, you're fueling your internal engine in the wrong ways right now. Because people who are fueled by the being side never really ask this. Because again, they do because they are. But here, you're asking this question because you can only do, and you only want to do if you can have. And so if you need to ask this question, this is actually why your changes can never seem genuine to your partner, can never seem real to your partner, can never seem permanent to your partner. As we discussed in a previous video, right? It's only sometimes when the hope is really taken away from you that your real intentions will really show. Whether you're doing this to simply manipulate your partner into coming back, or are you doing this because that's who you are, your permanent self, your genuine self, and so on. And this is also why you cannot accomplish any of the internal shifts that you need, the identity shifting, the mastery of the frameworks and the mindsets to really get you the external results and build momentum over time. And this is why you cannot ever get through her confirmation bias, the paradox of change, because again, you're really, really tethered to your situation here. So if you understand this concept of the internal engine, and also the fuel of this internal engine to fuel the breaking of the negative feedback loops that are happening in the relationship right now. Let's actually take a look at this, at how this manifests itself in real life. So a lot of the questions I get, the one example that I get often is when, what do I do? How do I turn this negative into positive when my partner is really stonewalling me? When she shuts down every single time I try to start a conversation. So that's actually a very simple one, because when your partner shuts down, understand that her shutting down is actually a genuine expression in itself. Her shutting down shows me how difficult or how hopeless she feels right now. Maybe it's the lack of trust, maybe it's the lack of safety, maybe it's the lack of ability, but nevertheless, it's the self-preservation that really causes her to stonewall at the moment. So here, if I'm understanding this, I'm using the right mindsets, the right paradigms to be able to shift myself internally from usually people getting angry at someone for stonewalling to me finally having the compassion, the understanding for why someone is stonewalling. So here I'm able to shift internally this negative thing into more of a positive. And once I can shift this internally from a negative into a positive, I can start to do that externally as well. So if my partner stonewalls me, I might say to her, for example, hey, I understand you don't want to talk right now, and that's totally okay. I understand that, in the past, I've made it really difficult for you to talk to me about different scenarios. Maybe sometimes I don't listen. Maybe sometimes you feel judged. Maybe sometimes you feel like I'm not understanding the problem or what you're trying to express at all. And so you stonewalling and you shutting down here may seem like a bad thing, but I actually appreciate this because it shows me just how far we are in terms of creating that safety, creating that trust to actually communicate on that very open level. So I want to thank you for that. So again, here, I'm taking the self-esteem that I have, the untethering that I have, the ability to understand the frameworks and the mindset to shift myself from negative into positive internally and also externally to play out this framework so that I can turn this negative event of her stonewalling into a much more positive event, a much more event that can plant seeds, that can start to open my partner up eventually. So that's one example of this in action. There's so many more examples of how this can play out in action. In our program, this is something that all our students have really mastered. They learn all the right frameworks, all the right mindsets, all the right ways to shift their identity, all the right ways to grow their self-esteem and to become more untethered to their situation or their partner as well. So they can have this inner strength fueled in the right way that allows them to stay motivated despite the challenges and to stay motivated for a very long time so that they can actually become the leader to change this negative feedback loop and start saving the relationship by themselves. And this is also why, of the 500 to 700 people that we enroll every single year, virtually all of them start in this phase where their partner has given up and they're the only ones trying to save the relationship. But if you look at our client success stories or just look at the emails that we send every week, you'll see that we get people massive success on this really bad problem every single day. But again, it requires that you stop believing in the myths that it takes two to tango and that you cannot save your relationship by yourself. It just takes the understanding of the how to not only motivate yourself internally, but also how to reverse the negative feedback loops externally as well. So if you want to learn more about this process, you can join me in my free masterclass on the 5 proven steps to rebuilding your relationship from the ground up. In that masterclass, I'll show you the exact process that I show all my students to help them go from that brink of divorce, deal with a partner who is totally lost hope and totally given up on the relationship, and how to become the leader that can actually save the relationship by yourself. So if you want to join that masterclass, be sure to click the link above my head or also down in the comments below or description box below this video as well. And if you're looking for a free guide that can help you understand one of these frameworks, one of the many frameworks that we discuss in our program, then you can also download the guide I have for you above my head or also down below this video. And finally, if you want to join a free Facebook group where you can talk about your issues, your concerns, your scenario, and a member of the community, a member of my team, or also myself sometimes will go in there and answer those questions for you, then you can also join me in my free Facebook group down below this video as well. In the meantime, do leave a comment or your questions in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and what you thought about this video. And if you found this video to be very helpful and eye-opening, then click like. It really helps the channel out. And also subscribe to this channel for more content like this one. In the meantime, I'll leave you with just 2 other videos here to help you with more knowledge and more skills to be able to design a thriving relationship for yourself. For now, I'll see you in the next video.